off with a quote from State Senator Cedillo, who was the author of the California Dream Act, right? That although he agrees that we should be patient, I guess, and wait for the Congress to act on the Federal Dream Act, and I hope that that does happen, we, at least here in California, have something to be proud of and something to look forward to, right? And so, as the California Dream Act became implemented here in California, as practitioners, we were able to see what the 2012-2013 outcomes was for our students, what that really translated into. And what you see here is just a simple graph outlining what the cost of attendance is for UC or CSUs, and I took numbers from UC Berkeley and SSA. And we see the tuition, which is mostly covered with the California Dream Act, the amount that the students were receiving. But as you can see, it's still a long way to go to actually really cover the full cost of attendance, which includes not just tuition and fees, but of course living expenses, books, transportation, food, all of that. And so looking into our own students, with 10,000 Degrees in our organization, we were able to really see what the financial aid packages looked like for these students as they were being awarded California Dream Act. And what we saw was that the UCs were among the most generous with their support to undocumented students. While most of the money is being met through the Cal Grant, there's still some institutional aid, outside scholarships that our students leverage work. The need was left to about 29%. And the difference here with the CSU system, the need was significantly larger to 44%. And this is assuming that the students in this scenario were taking Cal Grant, were eligible for Cal Grant B and only getting the $1,473. Even when the second year full tuition coverage kicked in, it would have still met only about 29%, and the need would have still been about 44%. So as we can see, there is a long way to go still, but we are making progress and a step in the right direction. And so working every day, part of what we do at 10,000 Degrees is we provide workshops to our students through programs like Cash for College, where students come in and we help guide them through the financial aid process, making sure that they're filling out these applications, right? And so some of the things that we have seen is that there is this real fear of deportation. Right? That students fear that, well, I'm giving this application a lot of really personal information about myself. Where is this information going to go to? What are they going to do with this? And am I going to get in trouble, or are my parents going to be at risk for deportation? And really what we tell students is that their information is protected, right? There is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act that prevents institutions from disclosing or sharing their information without the student consent. So that's really important, and that does provide a sense of tranquility in the student that says, okay, I feel comfortable enough to disclose this information. The fear of deportation is, of course, a very real thing that affects students emotionally, physically, mentally, in all kinds of ways. And it really has taken a toll on some of our students' lives. Some of our students do have parents or siblings or family members that have been affected by deportation. And so one of the things that we have seen in the cases that where parents have been deported is that, well, you know, if my parents are no longer in this country, they've been deported, how can I report their information on the application? They're not here, I'm not living with a legal guardian. And the process is essentially the same as if a student was documented or undocumented, right? That they would still, in an ideal world, they would disclose the information of their parent, their respective place, wherever they now are. They would report their income if they had any, but of course in some cases there is no contact, or there's limited contact, or the parent is in a place that's remote and they don't have access to the parent's true income. And so in the cases where that doesn't happen, then of course the student would have to work with the financial aid office and make sure that they really understand the verification process, can get letters of recommendation as to what the situation of the student is, and really go into depth and really work closely with the financial aid office. Again, another situation that we have seen is where a parent is deported and returns to the United States. And so students have often asked me, well, can they even do taxes? Should they? Because they're under the radar. We don't really, then nobody should really know that they're even back in the country yet. And so, again, in a perfect world, the parent, if they're making any income, they would file taxes using an individual taxpayer ID number. But of course, sometimes that doesn't happen, and then it would depend then in that case how much money the parent is actually making. If they're making above what is required for them to report their taxes, then we encourage them to do their taxes. But if they're making under what is required, then the parent would still have to report their wages. And if at any point throughout this presentation you have any questions or if something comes up, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll all work together to answer your questions. So I'm sure that there are a lot of 17 and 18-year-olds out there that are filling out these applications that probably don't know too much information about taxes, right? Or what does filing taxes even mean? Maybe they're just first starting off filling out taxes. So it's hard to imagine that they would then go out and explain to their parents, this is what taxes are all about, and this is why you should file your taxes. So when we're talking to students, we really do explain to them, okay, these are the processes, and we talk to them and explain to them so that they too can become somewhat of an expert in terms of tax information, right? As an expert as you can possibly be without taking tax classes. So we tell them about this individual taxpayer identification number, which parents can use and they can use to file their own taxes if they're working, right? And you don't have to be a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident. I mean, I filed taxes using an ITIN for a long time, and it does not put that person at risk for deportation filing taxes, because of course the IRS wants money, right?
Yeah, so I heard a story where a friend of mine he was a citizen and he was at an H&R Block, and they got a call asked from an undocumented individual, and on the phone they were asking, how do I file taxes? They were that person was asking the H&R Block representative, and the representative says, you're an illegal alien, you can't file taxes. Now, I know that that's possible. Is there any rule, or is there any way that what he said is true? That there's no way you could file taxes as an undocumented person or without a social?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, when I was getting ready to file taxes, I wasn't asked for a social. I didn't have to disclose that, and so I was able to. Although I'm not an expert in what the intricacies of tax law is and who can and can't, but I would say that there's so many people out there doing taxes, and I think that's one of the biggest myths, is that undocumented people don't file taxes, and when in reality we do it, we are contributing, and so it's hard to imagine that so many people would be unable to provide money back to the IRS, which is again what they really want, right? So yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but maybe we can talk about like other resources that people can take advantage of. So there are other situations that have come up with our students where their parents are working under the table or working using somebody else's social security number, right? And so in those cases, they're still, again, using this ITIN, they can file taxes using that number and the information that's linked to that number, not necessarily what's linked to the social security number. And so taxes are increasingly important because in our practice, we work with primarily low-income youth, and so about 10% of the students, low-income youth that apply for financial aid get verified. And if you're familiar with the income verification process, the schools will require some proof or some information that will validate what you've reported on the application. And increasingly, they're asking for the tax return transcript. What we tell our students is just request it automatically so that you already are prepared in case that situation comes up. So taking a proactive step if income verification does come up. In the cases where parents don't file taxes, this is a way where we can motivate and say, well, if you might want to consider filing taxes if you don't already, because if they're going to require this form and you don't have it, it could delay the timeline that it takes for you to actually receive your financial aid, or it could even cause that you don't receive financial aid, right? And so we want to make sure that our students are prepared, getting the information ahead of time and being proactive. Another thing that has come up and has caused some confusion is a student name. Sometimes a student's name is listed differently with the school and then differently with their deferred action social security number, or even on their birth certificate, right? How many of you, I've heard numerous students and even myself who have multiple last names, and sometimes along the way, one of the last names gets omitted from certain institutions. And so one of the challenges has been making sure that they're consistent across the board, right? So students who have two last names on their DACA should also make sure that it's coordinated with the school so that the school reflects the same thing. On the application, you can put the California statewide student ID number if you don't have this deferred action social security number. And what we have seen is that students kind of get confused a little bit along the way. So it's important that as a practitioner, you really guide the student and provide the support when they're dealing with these institutions, because making a name change maybe at the school level can be a bit confusing if the school is not really trained on how to deal with students who have this need, right? And so making sure that you are guiding the student to be able to ask the right questions so that they can get the situation resolved.
I'm sorry, can we go back just for a second?
Sure.
Can we talk about income verification for a minute?
Sure, what is, do you have
So if they don't end up filing the taxes at all, are you able to use wages or bank statements, and how so, if they get a student verification request?
Yeah. I won't stand up. The campuses have a protocol that they follow. And they want taxes. It's federal document, state document, whatever. But if they haven't filed taxes, then they just look at wages, whether they have a W-2 or not. And then if let's say everything's been under the table, they might just say, well, give us a signed statement saying this is how much I made during the year. And that will meet the requirements for verification. It's less scary than you think it might be.
Is the signed statement
From the parent or the student?
not from whoever's paying it?
Well, actually, that is acceptable too. So if there was an employer who said, yeah, I'll say you made however many $1,000, and they sign it, it's what the campus has to do is show that they have taken reasonable steps to verify that the income on the application was accurate.
How does the employer not get in trouble for signing on that? Because it has to do with the the Privacy Act, basically, like whatever you report.
The documentation that the employer submits is not going to be sent on to any other government agency.
Okay.
It's just going to be put in the file. However, if they were strictly following, they're kind of saying, well, this person's probably undocumented, but I don't know that, but here's how much they made. They might balk. They might say, I'm sorry, I can't give you that. And so then it's back to the student or the parent to say, these are my wages. Some campuses might even have a form to sign. I certify that the wages above are correct.
And it's often just about having that communication with the campus and making sure that you are, again, being proactive because you don't want something like that to delay the process further. So just making sure that you're talking to the campuses. And so, again, we've talked about navigating the bureaucracies, guiding the students through, like, what are the kind of questions that I should be asking. And then one of the last things that comes up is after they complete the application, there is a little green box that says, like, I submit my signature. And along with that comes, I've had a few students that read the lines and say, oh, I could go to jail, or I could have to pay $20,000 to submit this form if I'm, like, lying and I'm submitting estimates. What is this all about? And so we just tell students that it's just in order to calm the nerves and in order to get them to feel comfortable submitting, it really is just about being honest on the application. Of course, we know that you're going to submit estimates for 2012, and you will have to resubmit the application when you have the 2013 taxes, when your parents and you have the 2013 taxes. But again, it's just a method of just a certification that says that you are being honest in this application.
Jenna, I have a question before on the other slide. So I'm still confused about the Social Security number from your diffraction versus the California statewide student ID, because I know that on the application they ask you that you can either put your ITIN number if you have it, or you can use the Fair Action Social Security number, but I don't know how they will know that that's an actual Social Security. Like, I'm still confused about that part. Or I don't know how that would work.
How the system would be able to tell the differences. I think it's more about just matching your information to, because you've submitted a college application, you've submitted your California Dream Act application, and then your high school submitting your GPA, and so all of that has to match all the way across. And so I would imagine that it's whatever you're submitting, whether it's an ITIN or whether it's your DACA Social Security number, it just has to match all the way through and all of the institutions. Because if, for example, your DACA is completely different from what you submitted at school and they're submitting your GPA verification, they're going to have a hard time really matching that and awarding you your Cal Grant award. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So one of the things that definitely comes up as a practitioner is that I don't know immigration law. I'm not an expert in immigration law, so I definitely want to keep references where I can refer my students who have more in-depth questions. And so E4FC, of course, is a great reference, but make sure that you know your local allies and where to send the students. And then also know what you don't know. If there's a question that you really don't know the answer to, it's a huge disservice to just guess. I think it's important to just really refer out to the student to another institution or organization that would have the best answers. And then, of course, accessing this information. It can be really intimidating even to just make a phone call. And so oftentimes I sit with my students and say, okay, let's do this together until you feel comfortable enough to really go out and do this on your own. So again, this is working with a population that it's really hard to come out and to share your status a lot of the times. And so it's important to keep that in mind. And so that's my bit. So thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Brian and
All right, so we're going to do a line by line, but we're not going to actually go through every single line. It's just too many questions. So what I'm going to do is just kind of go over some highlights of the DREAM application and just emphasizing some of the major improvements and enhancements and just some common mistakes and things to look for so that you can successfully help your student complete the application. But before I do, I've been getting a reputation in my office as being the numbers guy, the data guy. I don't know how that happened, but living up to that reputation, I want to just throw out some numbers, okay? So I'm just going to give you this number, 30,000. What do you think that number represents? Applications, right. Number of DREAM applications for the 2013-14 year, okay? So of the 30,000 that we received, how many of them do you think were on time, meaning that they met our second deadline? 15. Others? 22,000. 22,000, that's a good guess. It's actually 21,000. So pretty good, right? So about 21,000 students got it in by the March 2nd deadline. Okay, so of the 21,000 that got it in by the March 2nd deadline, how many of them got a Cal Grant? 6,000? A little bit higher? 20, that's a little bit too high. 7,500. Okay, so 7,500 students who applied for the DREAM application who were on time, 7,500 got a Cal Grant. Okay, and of the 7,500 that got a Cal Grant, I don't know all the numbers just off the top of my head, but about 4,500 were high school entitlement. About another 2,000 was transfer entitlement. And I think the last group is like, I don't know, 1,000, maybe a little bit less, got Cal Grant C. Okay? So that's kind of the distribution. So mostly it goes to the high school entitlement students. The students who are graduating high school this year or graduated high school last year, they have that 2-year window, remember, to apply for a Cal Grant, a high school entitlement Cal Grant. Okay, so if we got 7,500 of the 21,000 that got a Cal Grant, what happened to the rest of these students? What happened to them?
Well, I think another question is how many of them were financially eligible?
Right. You would think that this particular population of students would be the most disadvantaged, right? They would meet the minimum income and asset ceilings for Cal Grant purposes, but some of them actually did fall out. I think it was about 1,000 students that didn't meet the income and asset ceiling, so they were about $75,000, $80,000 depending on their household size. But the thing that most was troubling was 7,000 of the students who actually applied for a DREAM Act did not have a corresponding GPA. Okay, so yeah, that's staggering because basically they did part 1, they took the effort to go and do a DREAM application, but somewhere along that process, they didn't have a GPA submitted to us, a non-SSN GPA. So something happened, whether it was the high school or they got cold feet or something just happened along that process. So this is the target where we really need to make sure that students, when they're applying, they're not only applying for the DREAM application, but that we get their GPA as well. Yes, question in the back.
One of the things that happened on my campus that I know is that our admissions and records office representatives were saying that we do not have to submit a GPA verification because the school does it by itself, but they were referring to people who apply for FAFSA. So when we apply for Dreamers, they said, oh, it should be the same way. So I found out from another source that that's not true, that we actually have to submit a GPA verification, but that there are a lot of students who didn't get that information. So that's, I know that was happening in my campus and many other campuses too.
We heard the same thing as well, and that's why outreach and making sure that the correct information is out there so that people do not have the same problem. If you have a student where they're saying the high school is saying one thing, that they're going to do it, just make sure that student is proactive. And if worse comes to worse, get the paper non-SSN GPA form and force the counselor to sign it and certify that GPA and then send it to the student commission. Other question? Yes.
So is there any process if you fill out the DREAM Act incorrectly or that second part of the application of the GPA isn't right, as a student, are you informed at all?
Yes.
So you get some kind of email saying like you still need to do this or this was wrong?
That's correct. So the DREAM application is one thing. So we have, the confirmation page that the student can always refer back to make sure that they can complete their application. We did send some email communications. What we found was that not all students read their emails, or they change emails every 2 days, But the non-SSN GPAs, or the students who should be doing their GPAs, sometimes it's really, really hard to find where they are. So we rely on the people on the ground, like you guys, to really help the students make sure that the GPA is in. But we try to send email communications to them and try to inform them, but it's really difficult sometimes where students just don't read their information.
So where would the student go to check, so say I don't have I'm a student, I don't really check my email, but my teacher keeps bugging me, where do I go to say look, I did it, the DREAM Act is in, and
Right.
the GPA is in?
Once the student has completed their DREAM application, they can set up a web grants for students account, which will let them know that they have their financial aid application piece in, but their SSN or their GPA is missing.
So
Or they,
in web grant?
in web grants for students.
Is the website web
It's
grant?
basically it's their Cal Grant account.
Can you write the website?
Yeah, I can.
Cool.
But that's not a number.
There is a number. Grants. The number 4. Students. .org. And it's on. There's a direct link from our homepage as well. Yes.
Just in case the schools aren't sending in the GPAs for the Dreamers, so how can they become proactive and just do it themselves? They go to a counselor, get it signed, and then is there a deadline to get that GPA?
March 2nd.
March, okay,
Yes.
so that's easy.
Yes.
And then where do they send it in? Do they,
To the California Student Aid Commission. The address is actually on the paper form.
okay.
Yes. Was there a question in the back?
I was gonna say, should we be emphasizing like on our outreaches to the Catholic college events about them actually having to sign up for that?
Yes,
So they can
absolutely.
check, because that would be the most important step, because obviously we missed 7,000
Yes.
that could possibly be eligible.
Right. So this is the target. We really have to make an effort to make sure that students complete both parts. Okay? So one last number I want to throw out at you guys. 6,000. That's the number of 1415 DREAM applications that we have received up to today. And we've been open since January 6th. So we've received 6,000 DREAM applications so far. We still have 5 weeks, 6 weeks before the March 2nd deadline, so there's still a lot of time. We expect a huge push of students to get their DREAM application into us. We really want to beat this target, to beat this number from last year. So I'm going to go ahead and start the demo site, or the line by line. And what's cool this year is that we have a DREAM application demo site so that you can access, and you don't need me or Brian to come and talk to you. You can just sit at the comfort of your own desk and just play around, make some accounts, get familiar with the application, all the little nuances about the application, so that when you help students, you know the application inside and out. And then as they encounter issues and problems, you can help them. So the website is, I can write it down for you guys as well, over here. Okay. So HTTPS training CSAC.ca.gov. Okay? So you can come to this website just like I'm showing you right now, and this is your playground. This is where you can come in, make accounts, do whatever you need to do. Every week, we just flesh out the data. So whatever you put in there, we just erase it, and the following week, we just start over. Okay, so this is a really good tool for you guys to just play around with and just get familiar with it. And that's what we're going to do today, just so that you get familiar with it. Okay. Okay. So when you come into this website, you'll see this. And it's just one application, the DREAM application 1415. This is just a demo site. And it looks exactly like the live version, okay? So if you're helping a student and they want to actually submit an application, make sure you're not in here. Make sure you're actually in the live version. We don't want any discrepancies or arguments later on. Okay. So if you're familiar with the DREAM application, there's basically 3 different options. The first one is starting a DREAM application. This is the first time you have provided us any information to us. Okay, this is where you would start, right here. The middle one is where you've started a DREAM application and now you're a dependent student. You have to provide us with your parent's signature. The last one is where you have submitted a dream application to us in the past, so meaning the 13-14 year, or you started one this year and you want to just go ahead and access it. Okay? Or you submitted a dream application in the 13-14 year and now you're wanting to do a 14-15. You don't have to go through the new California Dream Act application. You use the same user ID and password that you started last year and access it in the same using this link. Okay. So one of the first things that we decided to do, Brian and I were managers at the Student Aid Commission, but we were also project managers for this particular application. Between Brian and I, we've had a lot of financial experience, so we put our brains together and we kind of told the programmers, okay, this is what we need to do. And one of the issues that we faced a lot last year was students were completing the wrong application. DACA students were doing the FAFSA, and then later on they were told differently, so they called us in a panic and saying, I was told to do a FAFSA, but I have a DACA, so what do I do now? So we had a process in place to convert them back into a DREAM application while giving them a priority filing deadline. So that issue happened a lot. So in order for us to prevent that, we have a couple of questions to help the student make sure they're in the right path. Okay? So the very first question is, do you have an SSN? Pretty easy. And the student says, yes, I do. Well, did you obtain your SSN after the USCIS granted you deferred action status? You're like, yeah, I got my SSN through DACA. Then the final question is, did you meet AB 540 criteria? Yes, I did. I attended California high school for 3 years. I graduated from there. Boom. So you answered 3 simple questions, and it basically tells you that you should do a California Dream application. Yes?
Whenever the student has DACA, they're documented, and they choose the question, no, I do not have an SSN.
Let's see that. Okay, so I don't have an SSN. It doesn't ask him anything about DACA. So at this point, if you don't have an SSN, you can just answer the AB 540 question.
So, I mean, a couple of students fill this out, and I've noticed that some of our students that do have DACA are saying they do not have that social.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it going to process the same way as it would?
It would, yeah. These questions here is basically just to help them get down the right path.
Okay.
So if you answer no, that you're not AB 540 criteria, basically tells them that they're not eligible to file the DREAM application and they should go talk to their financial aid office. Okay? So we talked a lot of different permutations, and hopefully that every scenario possible, whether it's AB 540 or citizenship or DACA, the student would truly understand which application to fill out. So I went ahead and started. Yes, question?
AB 540 just means you graduated high school?
No, AB 540 is the legislation that basically states that you graduated you attended a high school, California high school for 3 years, and you graduated at that California high school, and that allows you to basically have your fees, your out-of-state fees waived, and then under AB 540, covered through AB 131, you're now eligible to receive state aid. Well, yeah, California residency, but then it's basically exemption to remove your out-of-state fees. All right. All right, so started an application. You'll see that the student comes in, will have 2 options, 14-15 year or 13-14. Most of the students are going to be filling out the 14-15 year, so they'll select that option. Okay, so this is the first big improvement. You guys all remember last year's application? It was pretty unique. Just one long column of questions. So what we did is we took it similar to the FAFSA where they have a tabular format, and although it may not be as sophisticated in terms of, putting it couple questions and then moving on. We just separate it into different sections: students, dependency, parent, signature, and confirmation page. You can see that I've created an account, but I have not completed my application. And because I haven't completed my application, the confirmation page in the CalSAR has been grayed out. Once I submit, the confirmation page in CalSAR will then enable, and you'll see that you can access those tabs. It's always good to just kind of go through the instructions here. So it's just some tips for the student to complete. And you can just basically navigate. Most of the questions here have an asterisk. The asterisk is required questions that the student has to fill out. Now, we say that we copied, or we mirrored, the FAFSA a lot. Copied. Control C, Control V, right. So we did that, but I would say about 75 to 80% is similar to the FAFSA, but there are some things about the DREAM application that's unique to Dreamers. There are some questions that we omitted and some questions that are not mandatory. Yes?
What happens if you forgot to put one of your last names in the name? How can you change that?
Okay. That's a very good question. Okay? So for the DREAM application, how does a student submit their GPA? Which method? Non-SSN? Non-SSN. Okay, so when you're matching the student's DREAM application with the GPA, what do you think we're matching it against if there's no SSN?
Name, birth date, school name.
Exactly. So what we encourage students to do is make sure that the name that's on your DREAM application matches the name on your non-SSN GPA. Okay? Now after you've been awarded a Cal Grant or you've been through our system, you can then make name changes. But in the initial application period, you want to make sure that your non-SSN GPA matches your DREAM application because we don't have a unique identifier like a SSN to match it up, to marry it up.
No, I'm saying on the actual application itself though, because I ran into a student whose last name they forgot to include their second last name.
Yeah, you can see that the last name is grayed out. At this point, if they want to make a name change, they need to contact us, call us, and we can do that for you, for the student.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, yes.
So when you're submitting the DREAM application for the non-SSN GPA,
Yes.
Is it, even though you're saying, yes, I have the SSN through DACA,
Uh-huh.
are you using that DACA SSN at all, or is that just an outlier number that?
We're not using it at all right now, but we are collecting it if the student provides it.
Okay.
Yes. And I'll show you that, okay? You can see here, question 8, social security number. Is it required? It's not required, okay? So let's say I put it in a social security number. What happens? Another question pops up, right? Question 8A. If you entered an SSN in question 8, was it issued after you went to the DACA process? Okay? Now, you can say yes if you got it. And we're just collecting this information for this year. Okay? And we're not exactly sure what we're going to do with that data as of yet. It's like I have an idea, but it hasn't fully processed yet. But the way I think it may happen in the future is a lot of the students who are going through the DACA process, do you think that they will gain citizenship soon? Yes? Soon? Let's say they do. Are they eligible for the FAFSA? Right? So let's say that a student who has a DACA SSN but does a DREAM application in 14-15, but in that process they become naturalized and get their citizenship. In 15-16 they can do a FAFSA. And they can get a Cal Grant, a Pell Grant, and all the other different federal benefit programs that's offered. Okay? So we're just collecting this information for right now. That's why it's not required. Another question to kind of think about is question 16, student citizenship status. it's in there because we want to have it make sure that we don't have students who are U.S. citizens, again, even though we may have asked it up front, filling out this application. Let's say I click, I am a U.S. citizen. You get a question that basically says, are you sure? Because if you are, you should be doing a dream app. Okay, so in reality, they really should just put number 3. If they choose the second one, eligible non-citizen, same thing. Eligible non-citizen students with a green card status. Okay. All right, so just continuing on with the application, filling it out. I'm going to just go ahead and skip all of the not required questions. Student is male or female. Again, remember, if a student is male between the ages of 18 and 6, they will have to do selective service at their campus. And you can see that as the student is navigating through the questions, the helpful hints on the right side, right here, it follows them and basically gives them some guidance to make sure that they don't answer the question incorrectly. All right, so the name of your high school. Pick my old high school. Now here's a little thing. Now the student they see that the high school has been found in the search, but you want to make sure that the student actually clicks the high school because it has to move from here to here, okay? Otherwise, if they don't click it, then that data is not captured, okay? Because when you're doing a broader search and you're selecting a high school like in Oakland, you may get a lot of hits, okay? So in order for the student to make sure that they select the right high school, they need to actually click on there so that the data is saved on that question, okay? Yes?
I just had a previous question about selective service. Is there a way to can they be registered through the application?
The selective service?
Yeah.
No, they cannot.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, we actually had some conversations with selective service. We hope to maybe partner with them so that might be a future enhancement. But for right now, all of that has to be done through the campus, through the paper process. Yes. Okay, so I'm just completing the application. They come to the tax questions. Most of them maybe will not have filed or they don't earn enough income to file taxes. So I'm just going to say not going to file. And you'll see that as I click not going to file, all those tax questions will suddenly just disappear. Gone. So it shortens the application and really, helps the student to complete it on time. But maybe they did earn some wages, but not enough to actually file taxes, so they can definitely report that here. And then questions 44, the next series of questions, they're not required. These are just very FAFSA-like questions to ask them about child support and other benefit programs they may have been involved in. And what FAFSA does is they ask these questions because they want to capture any untaxed income or income that is not necessarily captured on your tax returns. So they're not required here.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, go for it.
Is any of, with the financial aid page, there's an option of doing the transferable information from the IRS. Is any of that possible with this application?
Yes, maybe. We want to partner with also the California Franchise Tax Board, but that hasn't happened yet. The FAFSA has it set up where they have the Department of Education and the Internal Revenue Service and the Department of Homeland Security, and they have all these partnerships and they're all under the same federal umbrella. The California state system, doesn't quite work that way. So even when the DREAM application was developed, it was very much a standalone application. But we do have that capability where we can partner with different agencies to make that possible, possibly in the future. Good question. All right.
Can you talk about the timer? Is that going to be completed with this application in 18 more minutes, or can you save it and continue it?
You can save it. I encourage you guys to make sure that students do save it. I was kind of just let it go down to a 2-minute warning to show you the warning that actually pops up. And just seeing if I can complete it within under the 18 minutes. But yeah, if I save this, it'll just start the timer back at 30 minutes. Yes. Okay. So here's where I'm adding the colleges. Again, the first California college that the student puts down, that's where we will send the Cal Grant information to. That can always be changed if the student wishes to make changes here or once they receive a Cal Grant, they can make school changes as well. Yes? You can do it before, or you could do it. No, it doesn't.
For the school service?
No, you can make these changes all the time. Before the student actually decides where they're going to go and get paid, they can make these changes. Yes?
Is it like the FAFSA where when you click next, it saves the pages you've already completed, or you have to click on the save option?
You actually have to hit the save.
Is there a way to add that feature?
We can definitely put that on the list. Yes. Again, it's one of those things where I search a city and I search Sacramento, and all of the colleges that are eligible to participate in the Cal Grant program in the city of Sacramento or have Sacramento in their name will populate. And you want to make sure that the student selects it by just clicking on it, sees through Sacramento, and then selecting the housing plan, on campus, living with parents or relatives, or off campus. Okay, and I just go to next. This next tab, dependency, is really, really important because as a student is answering questions about their dependency, it will dictate whether or not they will have to answer questions about their parents. And you can see that the first two questions were carried over because they were already asked in the prior questions. And basically, if the student cannot answer yes to any one of these questions, they are a dependent student. So what is the age that a student becomes independent? 24. Good. So even if you live by yourself at the age of 20, take care of yourself, are you an independent student?
Or you're married or have a kid.
You could have, married with a kid, grad school. So I'm going to answer no to these questions. Okay, but let's just say that I did answer yes because I qualified. Let's say I was a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. It'll tell me right away that I'm an independent student. Okay, and if I am an independent student, do I have to answer questions about my parents? So you can see that the whole parent section has been just wiped out. They don't have to worry about it, and they can just complete the application from at that point. Okay? But, I was just kidding. I'm really not. I was just testing to make sure the application worked. All right. So now the student's going to answer questions about their parents, and hopefully the parent is sitting with them to help them answer the questions. Marital status.
You skip from tab to tab if you skipped one of the required.
Yeah. If you skip from tab to tab, once you hit submit, any questions that were required that you skipped, it'll make you go back and answer it. So now I'm just providing parental data. No social security numbers for the parents.
If the student says that their parents are separated and one parent lives with them in the U.S. and the other one in another country, are they required to, will it prompt them to put both parents' information for income?
Divorced or separated, it will only require one parent.
Oh.
Yes.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right, let's stay divorced and separated then. Had a falling out. Okay, so again, this is just typical questions asking about their household size. Number in college. And then here's where it gets a little tricky because question 84 will now start asking questions about the parent's tax filing status. Okay? And we've had some discussions about, using someone else's social security number, using a taxpayer ID, whatever status that they may be. Again, just try to answer it truthfully to the extent possible. For our purposes, I'm going to just say not going to file. Yes?
So if their parents are doing taxes with somebody else's social security number or tax ID, would that be not going to file or file and then you put that other
They should
ID
file,
number?
if they're using someone else's social security number, they should really take steps to get their taxpayer ID.
But if they're not, like
If they're not going to file-
the kid's parents are like, okay, we're gonna file, but we're doing it in this kind of shady way. Like, do I just put they're not filing, or do I put file and then will I be able to answer those questions? with
Well,
the
it
file?
kind of depends. If the earnings that they have is above the threshold in which taxes are required to be filed, then they really should take steps to obtain a taxpayer ID.
So I should just strongly suggest that.
Yes.
And then do not going to file.
Yes.
What is the threshold?
The threshold,
20,000.
20,000 for married filing jointly.
What about for single?
10,000.
10,000 for singles.
You would enter zeros for the parent's social security number?
Yeah, I put in zeros because I didn't have a taxpayer ID and I didn't make enough to file taxes just for this purposes. But if you do have a taxpayer ID, the parent does, they can put it in there.
That's better.
Okay, so question 92, I said that I'm not going to file, but I did work and I made 19,000, just underneath the threshold. What a coincidence. And then it's going to ask you questions about your assets, how much you have in your checking account, savings account. And again, as a student is going through the question, it's always good to just look at the helpful hints text box. It really provides some good examples and guidance. All right, so not too bad. So at this point, I've answered questions about myself, my dependency, and also my parents. I'm ready to submit my dream application. And of course, in this scenario, the student doesn't have an actual PIN number. Okay, I know the FAFSA, the students get a PIN number, but all they simply need to do is just check this box, read this information, and then hit submit. Okay. Now it's going to say, we notice some invalid data. Please check back for any errors. So I'll go back here because it's shaded in orange. And I didn't answer this one particular question about Chafee. We asked this question about Chafee. If you guys are familiar with the Chafee grant program, it's for foster youth. And we just asked this question just so that if we need to contact the students so they may be eligible for this, it gives us a good way to access and provide some information to the students.
I have another question.
Yes.
If both parents or the legal guardian is deported and they're making income in the other country, what do they use to say or to verify the income that they're making? If they're not filing taxes here, obviously, like what do they use?
Yeah, that's a good question. What do you think, Robert?
Typically, we would use a tax return from the country that they're working.
So they validate that?
Say again?
They validate, like they'll accept that information
Yeah.
if it's.
Actually, we require it.
Okay.
Robert's a good friend of mine. We worked together at UC Davis, and he's still there, so I like to pick on him.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right. So I submitted it successfully. Student gets this message. Your application is currently being processed. This may take 24 hours to complete. And it gives them a 24-hour window before they can actually go back in and make corrections. All right. So we did this, basically a 24-hour block where they can't go back in and make corrections to actually protect the student. And the reason why is because when we didn't have this block, the student would go in and just hit save and submit, save and submit, and basically we get like 20 transactions for a student on one day. And for the school who receives all this data, the Cal ICER information, it just gets too much. Yes, Robert?
What happens if they submit this for the first time erroneously on March 3rd?
That's okay.
Okay.
Because what's important here is that I hit the submit button. That's the key thing here. Once you hit the submit button, you put your date stamp of March, before March 2nd, it's priority filing deadline, okay? Now, if I saved it and not submitted it, did I meet the deadline?
Nope.
You gotta make sure the student hits submit. Because when you hit submit, that information comes to our database, it puts a timestamp and marks that student's California DREAM Act before the priority filing deadline. Yes?
What happened to the parent in signature that used to be there 2 years ago?
We're gonna get there. Yeah. Okay, so now that they've submitted
Before
it.
you get there.
Yes.
If they submit without the parent signature on March 2nd.
Yes.
And then they submit the parent signature March 5th, say.
That's okay.
That's okay.
That's
So
okay.
it's just the actual application.
That's correct.
Not the signature. Okay.
That is correct. So the first submission of the DREAM application is what we call transaction number 1. If transaction number 1, without the parent signature, is submitted before the March 2nd deadline, then they are good to go. Okay? And they can make corrections after that and still have that March 2nd deadline. All right. The next thing is the this confirmation page. I heard Nancy talk about how important the confirmation page is. And you can see here that it says there are issues with your dream applications that need to be resolved for you to complete it. And Common Code 108 basically says that your parent needs to sign your dream application because you are a dependent student. And you'll know right away that this dream application is incomplete because if it is fully complete, you'll see some text about expected family contribution. And you can see here clearly there's nothing about your EFC is this, your EFC is 0, your EFC is 1,000. There's nothing about that here. So they need to make sure that this gets resolved right away, parent signature. Okay? The other tab that becomes active once you hit submit is the CalSTAR, or the California Student Aid Report. We've heard students come back and say, yeah, you know, my financial aid office, they don't believe me that I actually did a dream application. So the student can come here, hit this PDF icon, a nice PDF document which will come out which has a summary of their dream application. They can print it and then go to their financial aid office and show them the proof. Yes?
Is it just for that year, or is there going to be like a transaction number for every year that you've done it?
It'll be all the transaction numbers for this particular academic year because they're in the 14-15.
Okay.
And then also if they need to go back, they can access the 13-14.
Okay, so what if they wanted to access their 12, 13, is that just gone?
Yeah, the 12-13, it's closed.
Okay.
Yeah. Alright. So let's go to the parent. The last thing we'll do the parent signature. And you can see from the confirmation page, there's a parent signature icon. You don't have to necessarily go all the way back out and hit the middle parent signature login. You can just click it here. And application year, 14-15. What do you want to do? I want to submit my parent signature. And at this point, you're the parent, okay? Or I'm the parent now. And I need to provide information about the student. Now remember the parents reported wages when the student was in the application and they provided data about the parents' wages. You see how it comes back now? Does anyone know where they've seen this before outside of the dream application?
1040.
1040?
Yeah, well, actually it's National Prior Years, or
Yeah.
AGI, something like it.
TurboTax.
Right.
TurboTax. So I was actually doing TurboTax, and I was like, hey, I'm going to steal TurboTax's idea and validate the parent signature through this way. So some sort of identifier, because there's no social security number again. Nothing to identify that this student matches with this parent. So we're just doing this question just to identify that truly this student matches with this parent. There was a question earlier about the H&R block. Who asked that question? She left? Okay, now she's gone. Okay. Well, anyways, H&R Block, just as an aside, they hire seasonal workers, right? And they're not always tax professionals per se. So it might always be good in that situation if you hear something that's a little fishy, to get a second opinion. Yes.
I used to work for a tax preparation agency, and that's exactly right. You were not trained on ITINs, and this was very recently. I was trained by a nonprofit that provided free assistance. So if you have any families that you're working with, I would find one of those beta organizations like Brighter Beginnings in Oakland, because they're usually more informed about that stuff.
For the non-SSN GPA, is that like a form you print out, or how is it that they?
Yeah, the non-SSN GPA, a lot of the high schools, like Oakland School District and Los Angeles Unified School District, what they'll do is they'll send it to us electronically through an upload process in our database. But if your high school is not participating in that, they can print the form and mail it in to us. Yes?
Under the reported wages, is that their AGI or is their combined wages?
It's the parents' wages, so it'd be one of the parents.
Oh, either one. Oh,
Either one, yes. 1 minute left. Okay. I hit the wrong one. Request parent pin. Okay.
30 seconds left.
30 seconds. Okay. So basically, the student will get the parent will get a 4-digit PIN number, and they just sign it, and the student will go back into their application, and it'll have the expected family contribution information. Yes.
Last year for kids that had a problem with their Pell Grant, whether it was Pell Grant or or with the freedom application, they received a generic letter saying something's wrong with it. And then one of the prompts was also, please make sure your FAFSA is up to date. When we called, because I made my kids call and said, no, I know you filled out the right one. We were told that it was a generic letter that was sent out. Is that going to be different? Because that causes a lot of stress when the word FAFSA was on there and we're telling them not to do FAFSA.
Brian, I thought you updated that letter.
Listen, I had as much hair as him before that letter.
I just think that would make our life a lot easier when we're working with these kids because they're already confused, not confused.
Yes.
And to get a generic, I understand you have to do a generic letter, but if they could just not have the word FAFSA on it.
Okay. Yeah, we've changed a lot of them to financial aid application, which is FAFSA or DREAM app. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
So when the parent gets the PIN number, how is that sent to the parent?
They receive it right on the
So they don't
application.
have to have an email address?
No. Okay, thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you.